Hello viewer. I saw a video recently on therapy by Healthy Gamer GG that got me thinking about liberalism. I wanted to try this React model of video making for a while now, and so what better opportunity to do so than reacting to one of my favorite personalities on this platform, Dr. K. For those of you who have never heard of Dr. K or his channel, Healthy Gamer GG, he has a Bachelor of Science from University of Austin, Texas, and a medicine degree from Tufts University. He did his residency at Harvard Medical School's Massachusetts General Hospital. During his undergraduate years, he found himself addicted to video games, so at 21, he left for India to pursue becoming a monk, where he studied yoga and meditation before returning to finish his undergraduate degree. In 2019, he founded Healthy Gamer GG to help others struggling with video games addiction. Fast forward to today, and Healthy Gamer GG has millions of subscribers and has become a prominent channel on this platform. Today, we are going to check out his video on why therapy sucks for men. After watching this video, a couple of things clicked in my head and highlighted some of the problems that are worth addressing when it comes to liberalism. Let's dive in.
So we have to start by understanding where this idea that talk therapy is the gold standard for treating mental illness comes from. So what we really need to understand is that the majority of patients in the history of psychotherapy have been women. About 60 to 70% of patients today who engage in psychotherapy are women. The other thing is that about 60 to 70% of therapists today are actually women. So I think what happened early on in psychiatry or psychotherapy is that the majority of people we were helping were women. And so when me as a doctor, when I look at 10 of my patients and I see, okay, so it looks like talking to people about their feelings on average is the most successful thing that I can do. But even though that's factually correct, I may not be taking into account that 7 out of those 10 people are women. And maybe the people who are getting helped the most with talk therapy or talking about their emotions are actually women. If you actually look at the American Psychological Association's guidance for working with boys and men, they sort of point out a systemic bias in the way that we diagnose men and women.
We like to think that, people use reason and rationality to come to understand something, and particularly in this case, as Dr. K is discussing, mental health. This use of reason and rationality by professionals and really everyday people is what makes us think that a judgment is correct. But I think it's important here to highlight something that David Hume points out to us. Hume highlights in his treatise of human nature that the way we make judgment about things is based on experience rather than rational connections. Basically, when we experience a condition over and over and over again, we come to associate that condition with proper or normal state of affairs. Let's say you see a cup fall and break. Now, let's say you see this happen multiple times. So now you come to believe that whenever a cup falls from anywhere, it will eventually break when it hits the ground. This may not seem like a glass-shattering revelation, but it is important. Think about the cup again. You see it fall one more time. However, when you look down, you realize that the cup is not broken. That is because this cup was made of plastic rather than glass. The cup example is rather innocent, but the habitual understanding that it highlights lead to some really bad problems. For example, up to the 1990s, men were predominantly studied for heart disease, so we come to understand the symptoms of heart disease and heart attack by studying mainly men. Now, we come to find out women show different symptoms when they suffer or are about to suffer a heart attack. But how many women had gone through a misdiagnosis because of this assumption? Politically, propagandists and biased social media personalities online make extensive use of this theory, even if they don't know it. They show you particular type of images on repeat to make you feel like you are experiencing something over and over in order to push your opinion in one way or another. This is not to suggest that what we consider normal is harmful or bad, but that our experiences and what we may feel to be accurate are at times what lead us astray. So it is important to keep an open mind, acknowledge our personal shortcomings, be open to new experiences, and give others the benefit of the doubt from time to time, both in our personal life and professional.
If you're a man, an emotion is a problem to be solved, not something to be talked about, right? So think about like if you get bullied on the playground and you feel ashamed of yourself and people call you a fat kid and beat you up, that isn't something you talk about. In fact, if you go and cry to mommy or cry to the teacher, you're actually treated worse. You're taught that articulating problems and talking to people is cause for punishment. Instead, what you're supposed to do if you're a man is fix the problem, right? So if kids make fun of me for being fat, I'm supposed to lose weight, get ripped, learn martial arts, and the next time they talk, I'm going to teach them who's boss. And so if you sort of think about it, the solution to an internal feeling ashamed, is to take an action and change the circumstances that make me feel that way. If you're feeling bad in here, as a man, what we're taught is you're supposed to go fix the problem out there.
Now here I want to look at one of my least favorite philosophers and a concept he highlights because, well, he was objectively a horrible person. He still has some very interesting insight into this. And that concept is ontological alienation. A very fancy term, but basically for Martin, we are not disembodied agents experiencing the world rationally or for that matter sentimentally, but rather through what he calls human existence. When you're existing in the world, you're not making an active choice to be in the world, rather you're kind of thrown into it. And so you experience the world through a variety of different modes. One way we make sense of our world is to live from day to day in an ordinary sense, which draws us into certain norms and cultural habits, or what we call today conformity. Martin calls this sense of conformity a state of authentic fallenness. When we are experiencing ontological alienation, we are effectively living an authentic fallenness. That is, we are living not according to our own will or really any will, but we get through the motions of living based on whatever norms and habits we conform to. We surrender to the world by submerging ourselves in mundane daily activities. This state is something we are consistently drawn to because there is an intrinsic allure to being a part of anything, rather than being isolated. But this process of being part of something is exactly what makes us live inauthentic lives, or to put it in Martin's language, lives that are primordially individualized. When Dr. K here says, when you're facing a challenge as a man, you feel like you have to do something about it, we may think we are taking control of our lives and living more authentically, but from Martin's perspective, we are consistently falling more into this ontological alienation. We are surrendering to the world in which our every action should be a constant struggle for control. On the other hand, if you don't do anything to change your circumstances, then you are further falling into ontological alienation on the other side. That is, you're surrendering to a world in which nothing can change. You can perhaps see this in politics, where each group thinks they have grasped the truth based on political alignments, but they are really fallen and surrender to different worlds, which results in their ontological alienation from our common world. How do you live an authentic life? Well, you have to take control of your being, or choose it according to Martin, but what that means is, well, not entirely clear. I like to think of it as self-understanding, or knowing your limits and abilities so that you can act accordingly in the world. Regardless, what Dr. K highlights, particularly about the way men engage with their problems and how we are action-oriented, speaks to one of the aspects of political life which Martin also highlights: our desire to be fallen, which results in living inauthentic lives. Again, this is usually materializes most visibly in polarized societies in the most negative sense, because depending on which world you surrender yourself to, you will be very hostile to what you perceive to be the opposition.
On this track of simply talking about them instead of acting physically. And a lot of the men that I've worked with, I've sort of noticed that this physical component is way more important than the talking component, at least compared to the women that I've worked with. Just to give you all a simple example, I find that the men in my office need hugs way more than the women. Now, there are a lot of complications to that. There's a gender dynamic, right, between me and the woman, where maybe the woman doesn't feel as comfortable to hug me. Maybe I don't feel as comfortable to hug the woman. So I'm not saying that that's like a statement of fact. But what I've noticed is that like hugging men, the patients in my office who are dudes, leads to like a lot more emotional healing and sometimes tears and all this kind of stuff and like more jokes after we're done, right? So there's something very physical about the way that men deal with their emotions.
So here I want to talk a little bit about a common criticism that is levied against liberal societies and liberal democracies. Liberal societies are becoming more effeminate, or as some people like to say, men aren't men anymore. You may have heard this in the past. Hard times create hard men. Hard men create soft times. Soft times create soft men. And soft men create hard times. This is to some extent true. We are living in one of the softest and most feminine point in history in liberal societies. Liberalism embodies many aspects of this, but I would argue that is a good thing. In softer times, you're more likely to care about our community and our fellow citizens, or as Dr. K said, get more hugs. We take emotional burdens more seriously and discuss caring for each other in a more serious way. We care and we express that care. This nostalgia about the past is understandable and important, but it is not always good. In comparison to the quote about hard men and hard times, I would like to offer an alternative by the second President of the United States, John Adams. In a letter to his wife, Abigail Adams, in 1780, John Adams wrote, "I must study politics and war, that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, and naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry. In other words, the life of the next generation ought to be emotionally fulfilling. And the previous generation, otherwise something has gone terribly wrong in politics." This is, or at least is meant to be, the promise of liberal democracy. So I would say that the feminization of politics is not something to be shunned. Where things have gone astray is that at some point we forgot that new situations require new outlooks and new tools to solve the problems with. This is where we find ourselves today. That is not to say there are no problems today. On the contrary, we have many problems today. But the problems we had in the previous generations, we had the proper tools to respond to. Whereas today, we lack the tools to respond to contemporary challenges adequately. The answer, however, shouldn't be to look backwards. Rather, we should look to the now to create tools to solve modern problems. Speaking of which...
And so, if we assume all of this is true, what does this mean for you as a dude? So I know this sounds kind of weird, but the first thing that I'd recommend is that you actually seek psychotherapy if you're struggling in some way. And that may sound weird because you said, Dr. K, there's a systemic bias. Yeah, but it's still the best evidence-based treatment that we have for dealing with mental illness. Medication is just as good, by the way. And another thing we need to keep in mind is that there are randomized controlled trials on many types of psychotherapy, which show that they are equally effective for men and women. So it's not like psychotherapy works. It's just that if you're engaging in psychotherapy as a man, there may be a couple of things that we can arm you with to really make that psychotherapy really worthwhile. Therapists will say, how do you feel? And as dudes, we don't know how to answer that. So just be transparent with them at the beginning. Another thing that I'd recommend is that y'all check out this idea of normative male alexithymia, which is this idea that men are, by default, it's normative, so it's like most men are colorblind to their internal emotional state. And then you can even tell your therapist that, hey, I'm concerned that I'm a little bit alexithymic. So you're signaling to them that you may not be able to participate in therapy in a default way. The next thing that you can do is ask your therapist to change their style a little bit if it isn't working for you.
I really like Dr. K's videos. I really like his channel, Healthy Gamer GG. I highly recommend that if you haven't checked it out, go ahead and do so. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and comment and share the video if you did. While you're here, also press that subscribe button. It will only take you a couple of seconds, but it will help the channel immensely. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.